November 16, 1944, 0630 hours. The Herdgen Forest on the German-Belgian border. The air inside the foxhole doesn't just smell like pine needles and wet earth. It smells like rotting wood and cordite. It smells like fear. Obergefreiter Hans Weber presses his cheek against the frozen mud of the trench wall. The ground vibrates against his skin, a low, rhythmic thumping that rattles his teeth. It isn't his heart. It's American artillery walking a barrage line closer, 50 yards at a time. Above him, the dense canopy of the Herdgen Forest shreds apart as shells detonate in the treetops, sending jagged splinters of wood raining down like shrapnel. They call them Baumkrepier tree bursts. In this forest, the trees kill you just as fast as the steel. Hans checks his Mauser K98 rifle. He has 5 rounds in the internal magazine and 1 stripper clip left in his pocket. That is the sum total of his ability to stop the United States First Army. To his left, a 19-year-old private named Kunch is shivering so violently his helmet keeps tapping against the log roof of their dugout. Kunch isn't shivering from the cold, though the temperature is hovering near freezing. He's shivering from the hollow, gnawing ache in his stomach. They haven't seen a field kitchen in 3 days. Their last meal was a shared tin of watery turnip soup and a piece of bread so stale it had to be soaked in muddy water to chew. "They're coming, Hans," Kunch whispers, eyes wide, staring into the gray mist rolling through the black tree trunks. "I can hear the tracks. You can feel the tension tightening the skin on the back of your neck." This is the reality of the Wehrmacht in late 1944. The grandiose speeches from Berlin about final victory feel like a cruel joke here in the mud. Here, the war isn't about ideology. It is a mathematical equation of survival, and the numbers are bleeding out. The propaganda gobo's relentless radio broadcasts has drilled one thing into these men's heads. The Americans are gangsters. They are soulless products of a mongrel culture who will shoot you out of hand or let you rot in a cage. Surrender, they are told, is not an option. It is a death sentence. Suddenly, the artillery stops. The silence that follows is louder than the explosions. Then, the distinct, metallic clack-clack-clack of an M1 Garand rifle echoes through the mist. "Contact front!" Someone screams down the line. Small arms fire erupts. The terrifying rip of an MG-42 opens up nearby, tearing into the brush, but it's answered almost instantly by the overwhelming volume of American semi-automatic fire. Hans rises just enough to peek over the parapet. 50 meters away, shapes in olive drab are moving with terrifying efficiency. They aren't charging blindly. They are moving cover to cover, supported by a Sherman tank that grinds through a fire break, its 75mm gun swiveling toward Hans's position. Hans looks at Kunch. The boy is frozen, rifle clutching his chest like a teddy bear. Hans looks at the tank. Then he looks at his empty stomach. He realizes in that split second that the propaganda has to be wrong, because dead men don't feel hunger, and he is starving. If he stays here, he dies. If he fights, he dies. "Rouse!" Hans yells, grabbing Kunch by the collar. "Get up, no weapons, hands up." "They'll kill us," Kunch screams. "We're dead already." Hans roars back. He throws his rifle over the dirt berm. It lands with a dull thud in the snow. Slowly, shakily, Hans rises. He lifts his hands high above his head, palms open to the gray sky. "Nick Schiessen, don't shoot." The firing line wavers. A hulking figure emerges from the mist, a GI in a heavy Mackinac coat, an M1 Garand leveled squarely at Hans's chest. The American's face is hidden beneath a helmet rim, shadowed and unreadable. Hans holds his breath. This is the moment. The stories say this is where the bullet comes. The American steps closer, boots crunching on the frost. He looks at Hans. He looks at the trembling boy, Kunch. The American lowers his rifle barrel just an inch. He reaches into his webbing. Hans flinches, expecting a grenade. Instead, The GI pulls out a pack of Chesterfields. He doesn't shoot. He gestures with the barrel toward the rear. "Move it, Fritz," the American barks. Hans stumbles forward, his legs numb. As he passes the American line, he sees something that shocks him more than the tank. Sitting on the back deck of the Sherman is a crate. It's open. Inside are cans. Hundreds of them. Meat, fruit, coffee. Hans has just stepped out of the war and into something else entirely. But he doesn't know yet that the cage he is walking into is better supplied than the army he just left. November 16th, 1944, 1400 hours. 3 miles behind the front lines. The march to the rear isn't a death march. It is a tour through a different universe. As Hans and Kunch stumble down the muddy road, hands clasped behind their heads, they are forced into a ditch to let a convoy pass. But this isn't like the convoys they are used to in the Wehrmacht. There are no rib-thin horses struggling to pull wooden carts. There are no frantic mechanics cannibalizing one broken truck to fix another. Instead, the ground shakes under the roar of engines. A seemingly endless column of GMC deuce-and-a-half trucks thunders past, splashing mud onto the prisoners' field gray uniforms. 1, 10, 50, 100. Hans watches, his jaw slack. He counts more trucks in 10 minutes than he saw in his entire division during the retreat from France. And it's not just the vehicles, it's what they are carrying. Crates of ammunition stacked 6 feet high. Jeeps weaving in and out of traffic like eager terriers. Fresh troops sitting in the back of canvas-covered transports, smoking, laughing, looking remarkably clean. "Look at the tires," Hans whispers, nudging Kunch. "What?" "Rubber," Hans says, his voice flat with disbelief. Every single wheel has fresh rubber. In the German army, synthetic rubber is as precious as gold. They are running on bare rims in desperation. Here, the Americans seem to have enough rubber to pave the road with it. They are herded into a temporary holding area, a muddy field surrounded by hastily erected concertina wire. A cage. The fear returns for a moment. This is where the interrogation happens. This is where the stories say the beatings begin. An American MP, chewing gum with an almost rhythmic aggression, walks down the line of seated prisoners. He carries a cardboard box. He stops in front of Kunch. The boy flinches, squeezing his eyes shut. The MP drops a small, wax-coated cardboard packet into Kunch's lap. "Dinner unit. Ration type K." Hans gets one too. He stares at the package. It feels heavy, solid. With trembling fingers, he tears open the waxed outer carton. Inside, it's like opening a Christmas present from a forgotten life. There is a small tin of pork luncheon meat, a packet of biscuits, a fruit bar, a stick of chewing gum, and a packet of soluble coffee. Hans opens the tin. The smell of processed meat, salty, fatty, rich, hits him so hard his mouth floods with saliva. He digs out a chunk with his dirty thumb and shoves it into his mouth. It's not turnip soup. It's not sawdust bread. It is caloric density. It is energy. Around him, the sounds of weeping start. Not from pain, but from the sheer psychological break of eating a full meal for the first time in months. Kunch is eating the fruit bar, wrapper and all, tears cutting tracks through the grime on his face. "My God," Kunch chokes out, mouth full. "They have this for everyone? For every soldier?" Hans looks up at the American guards. One of them is opening a similar ration, taking a bite of a biscuit, and then casually, without a second thought, tossing the half-eaten cracker into the mud. That single motion hits Hans harder than the artillery barrage. The Americans are so rich in supply that they can afford to throw food away. In Berlin, Goebbels screams about the will to power. But here in this muddy field, Hans realizes the terrible truth. You cannot fight a war of will against an enemy who treats fresh meat as a standard issue commodity. Germany isn't just losing the war militarily. It is being outproduced, outsupplied, and outfed. And for the first time in years, sitting in the mud of a prison camp, Hans realizes something terrifying. He is safer here, as a prisoner of his enemy, than he ever was as a soldier of his own country. But the real shock is yet to come, because Hans is wounded a piece of shrapnel in his shoulder he's been ignoring for 3 hours. And he is about to find out what American captivity does with broken men. November 16, 1944, 2100 hours. 45th Evacuation Hospital near Verviers, Belgium. The adrenaline of surrender has faded, replaced by a searing heat pulsing through Hans's left shoulder. He's been hiding the wound for 6 hours, terrified that admitting weakness to his captors would lead to a bullet in the back of the head behind a shed. He is sitting on a wooden bench in a massive canvas tent. It's nighttime, but inside it's bright as high noon. Electric bulbs, dozens of them, strung along the tent poles, cast a harsh, unwavering light. The sheer extravagance of burning this much electricity near the front lines is staggering. But it's the smell that disorients him most. The pervasive stench of the trenches, that cocktail of unwashed bodies, latrines, and wet wool, is gone. It's replaced by the sharp, chemical sting of alcohol, ether, and strong soap. A medic approaches. He's young, maybe 20, with rolled-up sleeves and a Red Cross brassard pinned to his arm. He doesn't shout. He doesn't hit Hans with a rifle butt. He simply points to the blood darkening the sleeve of Hans's tunic. Hans flinches as the medic produces a pair of trauma shears and efficiently cuts away the filthy, lice-ridden wool of his uniform. The cool air hits the inflamed skin. The wound is ugly, a jagged tear from a tree-burst splinter, the edges already turning an angry purplish red. In the Wehrmacht, this is how you lose an arm, or worse. Gangrene is the quiet killer of the Eastern Front. Hans braces himself for agony. He expects a rough bandage slapped over the dirt, or perhaps just a shrug indicating he's not worth the supplies. Instead, the medic reaches into a kit and pulls out a small metal tube morphine syringe. He jams it into Hans's thigh. Within seconds, the world softens. The jagged edges of the pain blur into a dull throb. Hans watches, detached, as the American scrubs the wound with disinfectant that foams on contact. Then comes the miracle. The medic takes a shaker bottle and dusts a fine white powder directly into the raw flesh. Sulfa. Hans knows what it is. Every German soldier knows what it is, and they know their own army is critically short of it. Sulfonamide drugs are the difference between a tedious recovery and a slow death by sepsis. Here, the Americans are dusting it onto a prisoner like it's talcum powder. The medic finishes wrapping the shoulder in sterile white gauze so bright it hurts Hans as to look at it. He secures it with adhesive tape that actually sticks. "Okay, Fritz, you'll live," the medic mutters in English, tapping Hans on the good shoulder. He hands Hans 2 aspirin tablets and a tin cup of water. Hans sits there, stupefied. He is clean. His pain is managed with drugs his own officers can't get. His belly is full of American meat. He is wrapped in a wool blanket that doesn't smell of mildew. He looks across the tent. Kunch is there, sleeping soundly on a canvas cot, his face washed, looking younger than he has in months. A terrible realization begins to sink in through the haze of morphine. The propaganda didn't just lie about the Americans being gangsters. It hid the humiliating truth that the enemy values the life of a captured German private more than the German High Command does. Hans leans his head back against the tent pole. For the first time since 1941, he isn't afraid of dying tomorrow. But as the lights burn through the night, a new question emerges. If the front line was hell, and this is purgatory, what does the American version of heaven look like? They are about to find out, because the trucks are waiting outside to take them deeper into the machine. December 8, 1944, 2,300 hours. The deck of a Liberty ship entering New York Harbor. The Atlantic crossing had been a strange, suspended reality. For 2 weeks, Hans and 2,000 other prisoners lived in the hold of a massive cargo ship. They expected the terror of torpedoes. They expected to hear the scream of Kriegsmarine U-boats hunting in the dark. But the ocean was silent. The American convoy, stretching as far as the eye could see, moved with an arrogant invulnerability. Destroyers cut through the waves like sheepdogs, but they seemed almost bored. The wolf packs that Goebbels claimed ruled the seas were ghosts. They simply weren't there. Now the engine's slow to a deep thrumming idle. The steel deck is slick with freezing mist. Hans and a group of prisoners are allowed topside for fresh air before docking. Hans grips the railing, his knuckles white. He is looking west, toward the horizon. Do you see it? Kunch whispers next to him. The glow? Hans sees it. A dull, amber haze rising into the night sky. His stomach drops. He knows that glow. He saw it over Hamburg. He saw it over Cologne. It's the color of a city burning after a 1,000-bomber raid. They've been hit, Hans mutters, a grim satisfaction rising in his chest. The Luftwaffe. Or maybe the V2 South. Someone finally hit them. For a moment, he feels a flicker of patriotic pride. The Americans aren't untouchable after all. Their cities burn just like Berlin. An American guard, a thick-necked sergeant leaning against a bulkhead smoking a cigar, notices the Germans staring at the horizon. He sees the fear, the confusion, and then the dawning realization on their faces. He chuckles, a low, dry sound. "Relax, Fritz," the sergeant says, pointing with his cigar. "That ain't fire." The ship turns slowly into the harbor channel, and the obstruction of the coastline falls away. Hans stops breathing. It isn't smoke. It isn't fire. It is light. Millions of lights. Manhattan rises out of the black water like a cathedral of glass and electricity. Skyscrapers, untouched by bombs, are ablaze with windows lit from the inside. Street lamps trace golden grids across the city. Neon signs red, blue, green pulse with commercial energy. There is no blackout. There are no searchlights sweeping for bombers. There is just a city, alive, rich, and utterly indifferent to the war. Hans feels his knees go weak. He grabs the railing to keep from falling. For 5 years, he has lived in a world where striking a match at night could get you shot. He has lived in cellars while the RAF turned his neighborhood into brick dust. He believed Germany was fighting a war of survival against a struggling enemy. But looking at that skyline, the mathematical impossibility of a German victory crashes down on him. "Look at the electricity," Kunch weeps quietly. "Just to light the offices. At night, Germany is melting down church bells to make bullets. America is burning enough coal just to light up empty office buildings to show off." "The war is over," Hans whispers. The words taste like ash. "It was over before we fired a shot." The guard flicks his cigar butt into the dark water below. "Welcome to the US of A, boys. Enjoy the vacation." The ship docks, the gangplank lowers. But they aren't marching into a dungeon. They are about to board a train that will take them to the heartland of America, to the farm fields where the harvest is so plentiful it's rotting on the vine, waiting for German hands to pick it. Hans steps onto American soil. He is a prisoner, defeated and disarmed. Yet, as he looks at the fat, well-fed dockworkers and the endless rows of new cars waiting for export, he knows the strangest part of his war is just beginning. He isn't going to a prison. He's going to a job. February 14th, 1945, 0800 hours. POW Camp Concordia, Kansas. The train ride west had been the final nail in the coffin of their worldview. For 3 days, they rolled through an endless ocean of farmland. In Germany, every square inch of soil is fought over, tilled, and manicured. Here, fields stretch to the curvature of the earth, interrupted only by massive silos bursting with grain. Hitler went to war for Lebensraum, living space. The Americans have so much of it, they leave thousands of acres fallow just to rest the soil. Hans stands in the morning lineup at Camp Concordia. The wind sweeping across the plains is biting, but he is wearing a sturdy U.S. Army-issue Mackinaw coat with the letters PW stenciled in white on the back. It's warm, it's wool, and it fits. The camp commander, an older American major who speaks surprisingly decent German, steps up to the podium. "Today, work detail assignments," the major announces. "Local farms need hands for the late winter prep. You will be paid 80 cents a day in canteen scrip." Hans blinks. Paid. In the Russian camps, the stories say men work until they drop, then they are buried where they fall. Here, they are negotiating labor contracts. Hans is assigned to a detail at a local wheat farm owned by a man named Mr. Henderson. They ride in the back of a truck, unsupervised save for a single, bored guard who is more interested in reading a comic book than watching them. When they arrive, Mr. Henderson doesn't spit on them. He doesn't look at them with hatred. He looks at them like tools strong backs needed to fix a fence. "All right, boys," Henderson grunts, pointing to a stack of posts. "Let's get this done before lunch." They work hard. It feels good to sweat out the toxins of the war. The physical labor is honest, unlike the terrified scrambling of the front lines. But the real shock comes at noon. Mrs. Henderson comes out onto the porch. She rings a bell. Hans expects a bucket of gruel to be brought out to the field. Instead, Henderson waves them toward the house. "Wash up at the pump." Mrs. won't have dirt at the table. At the table? Hans and Kunch exchange a terrified glance. Surely this is a mistake. They wash the Kansas dust from their hands and timidly enter the farmhouse kitchen. The table is groaning. There is a roast chicken, golden and dripping with fat. There are mounds of mashed potatoes with a pool of butter in the center. Green beans, a pitcher of cold milk, and in the center, a basket of white bread so soft it looks like cake. "Sit," Mrs. Henderson says, placing a platter down. Hans sits. He stares at the chicken. He thinks of his mother in Hamburg, likely boiling potato peels for broth right now. The guilt hits him like a physical blow. He shouldn't be eating this. He is the enemy. He killed men who wore the same uniform as this farmer's son. But then the smell of the roast hits him. The primal instinct takes over. He eats. They all eat. They eat until their stomachs hurt. "You boys are skinny," Mrs. Henderson notes, pushing the bread basket toward Kunch. "Eat up." "We got plenty. We got plenty." The phrase echoes in Hans's mind. Back at the camp that night, the barracks are warm. Hans lies on his cot, staring at the ceiling. He has gained 10 pounds since his capture. His shrapnel wound is a faint pink scar. He is healthy. He is safe. He reaches under his pillow and pulls out a letter he's been writing to his parents, though he knows the mail service to Germany is broken. He looks at the sentence he just wrote. "I am a prisoner in a land of giants. They are not fighting us with hate. They are fighting us with surplus." He crushes the paper in his hand. The war is still raging in Europe. Boys like Kunch are dying in the snow for a regime that is already dead. And here, in the heart of the enemy's country, the biggest problem Hans faces is that the roast chicken was a little dry. It is a surreal, comfortable nightmare. But the comfort is about to be shattered. Because while the bodies are safe in Kansas, the minds are still tethered to Germany. And news is about to arrive that will tear the camp apart. May 4th, 1945, 1900 hours. Camp Concordia Recreation Hall. The physical war ended for Hans the day he dropped his rifle in the Hurtgen forest. But inside the wire of Camp Concordia, a different, quieter war is still being fought. The barracks are not united. They are a snake pit. At night, the 150%ers, the die-hard Nazis who still believe in the final victory, prowl the aisles. They hold kangaroo courts in the latrines. Men who speak too fondly of American food or suggest the war is lost wake up with bruises, or they don't wake up at all. But tonight, the Americans have intervened. The camp commander has ordered every prisoner into the recreation hall. The mood is foul. Feldwebel Meller, a man whose eyes are as cold and dead as a shark's, whispers to the men in his row, "Propaganda. Do not look at the screen. It is Jewish lies." The lights go down. The projector whirs to life, the beam cutting through the cloud of cigarette smoke. It isn't a Hollywood movie. It isn't a newsreel of American victories. The title card flickers. Concentration camps. Hans shifts in his seat. He expects to see a labor camp, maybe some rundown barracks. He knows the regime was harsh. He has seen the deportations in Hamburg, but he tells himself it was for the war effort. Security measures. Then the images start. Grainy, black and white footage rolls. A bulldozer pushing a mountain of skeletal limbs. Hollow eyes staring from bunks stacked like firewood, ovens, piles of shoes. The silence in the hall is absolute. It is a vacuum that sucks the air out of the room. Hans feels the blood drain from his face. He looks at the skeletons on the screen, starved to the bone, and then he looks down at his own hands. Hands that are fleshy and strong because the gangster Americans have been feeding him 3,000 calories a day. On the screen, an American General Eisenhower walks through the camps, his face a mask of disgust. He is forcing German civilians to walk through the piles of bodies. "It's a trick," Muller hisses, though his voice wavers. "Rubber dolls. Hollywood effects." "Shut up," Hans whispers. The words leave his mouth before he can stop them. Miller turns, his face twisting in rage. "What did you say, traitor?" "I said shut up," Hans shouts, standing up. The fear of the Feldwebel is gone, replaced by a nausea so profound it makes his knees shake. "Look at them. Look at what we did." The room erupts, not in violence, but in a collective, agonizing gasp. The denial is breaking. The psychological dam that held back the guilt is bursting. Men are weeping. Some are vomiting. Hans sinks back into his chair, unable to look away from the screen. He realizes now why the Americans treated them so well. It wasn't just logistics. It wasn't just the Geneva Convention. It was the ultimate humiliation. By treating the Wehrmacht prisoners with humanity, the Americans proved they were morally superior. They didn't just defeat Germany on the battlefield. They destroyed the German argument for existence. The Nazis claimed they were the master race, the pinnacle of civilization. But the master race is responsible for the skeletons on the screen, while the mongrel Americans are the ones showing mercy to their enemies. The lights come up. The projectionist cuts the power. No one moves. The swagger is gone from the diehards. The 150%ers look small, shrunken. Hans walks out into the cool Kansas night. The stars are bright above the prairie. He breathes in the fresh air, but he feels dirty. He realizes that surviving the war was the easy part. Living with the truth of what his survival supported, that is the sentence he will serve for the rest of his life. He survived the front. He survived the capture. He survived the hunger. But as he walks back to the barracks, Hans Weber knows that the Germany he fought for died in that recreation hall. And he is left with a terrible question. What do I do with this second life I have been given? The answer lies in the future, in a Germany that doesn't exist yet, a country he will have to help build from the ashes. March 12, 1947, 10:30 hours. Hamburg Hauptbahnhof, British occupation zone. The train hisses to a halt, steam venting into the shattered glass ceiling of the station. Hans steps onto the platform. He is wearing a windbreaker given to him by the Red Cross and a pair of American work boots that have walked the wheat fields of Kansas. In his duffel bag, he carries the unimaginable wealth of the New World. 3 cartons of Lucky Strikes, 5 pounds of coffee, and nylon stockings. He walks out of the station and stops dead. He remembers Hamburg as a city of brick and commerce. He remembers the spires. But what stands before him now is a moonscape. Hills of rubble, formerly apartment blocks, rise 30 feet into the air. The smell is ancient and dusty. Wet ash, pulverized mortar, and the faint, sweet sickly scent of bodies never recovered from the firestorms. People move through the ruins like ghosts. They are gray, hunched, and terrifyingly thin. They look at Hans with a mixture of suspicion and envy. Hans looks down at himself. He is tan. His shoulders are broad and filled out. He weighs 175 pounds. He is bursting with the vitality of a man who has spent 2 years eating steak, drinking milk, and working in the sunshine of the Midwest. He looks like a tourist in hell. He finds his family street, or what's left of it. The number 42 is painted on a fragment of a wall standing alone in a pile of bricks. A woman is clearing debris with her bare hands, stacking bricks to clean them for reuse. She is wearing a coat made of old blankets. "Mama?" Hans whispers. The woman freezes. She turns slowly. Her face is a map of exhaustion, cheekbones protruding like blades. It takes her a full 10 seconds to recognize her own son, not because he is scarred, but because he looks too alive. "Hans?" She chokes out, dropping a brick. You are so big." She touches his arm as if checking to see if he is real. She feels the muscle, the warmth. She starts to cry, collapsing against his chest. "We thought you were in Siberia. We thought you were dead." "I was in Kansas," Hans says softly, holding her frail body. "I was safe." That evening, in the cellar they now call home, Hans opens his duffel bag. He brews the coffee. The smell alone seems to brighten the dark, damp room. He hands his father a cigarette. His father, a veteran of the First War who lost everything in the Second, takes a long drag. He looks at Hans through the smoke. "They say the Americans treated you like kings," his father says, his voice raspy. "Why?" Hans thinks back to the Hurtgen forest. He thinks of the GI who didn't shoot. He thinks of the medic who wasted sulfa on an enemy. He thinks of Mrs. Henderson pushing the bread basket across the table. "Because they could afford to," Hans answers. "And because I think they wanted to show us that we were wrong. About everything." Hans realizes then the strange, quiet victory of his war. He didn't win any medals, he didn't conquer any territory. His victory was simply surviving the collapse of his own civilization by falling into the arms of the enemy. He looks at his hands that will now help clear this rubble. Hands that will rebuild this city, hands that were saved by a surrender he was told would kill him. The Third Reich promised them glory and gave them ruin. The enemy promised them death and gave them life. Hans takes a sip of the American coffee. It tastes like the future.